All right, Brent Pourciau, TopVelocity.net. Got a special little interview today with Josh Boggs and Sam Agnew here. I think you guys could do best at kind of telling everybody who you are. Um, so go ahead. Why don't you, Josh? Why don't you start?
All right, I'm Josh Boggs, full-time instructor here at Stealth Baseball. I also run Pitch Mechanics 101. Check out the website, pitchmechanics101.com, and at Twitter, at Pitch Mechanics.
My name is Sam Agnew Wieland. I'm an aspiring right-handed pitcher. I played 2 years in the Yankees organization and 2 years of independent ball. Now I'm coaching full-time at Stealth Baseball, and we're just hoping to learn a little bit from you guys and communicate. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. We're going to talk about really cool debate, which is weighted ball. So weighted ball is once again pretty hot, and we both use or implement them differently, or some not at all. So we'll that's what we're going to get started with today. So kind of the format's going to be, we'll just you guys, Sam and Josh, are going to lay out their approach and their reasoning for weighted balls, and then we'll lay out our approach and our reasoning for it. So I mean, just more on the hype right now. You know, it's MLB just put an article out that said, "Is it the wave of the future?" ASMI just did their study, and it's probably what has led to this. ASMI just did the study on the torques and I guess a little bit of injury rate, even though it wasn't like a long term study, and it's one of the first studies that come out for weighted balls and injury. There's many studies up to the 1960s of weighted balls and their effects on velocity that we know about. So that's kind of where we are today in this era. So why don't you guys take from there and kind of talk about what it means to your training and why you guys believe in it.
Sure. Well, first off, our understanding of weighted baseballs is primarily that of an arm path instructional tool. Some guys think of it as a strengthening exercise. Maybe you somewhat. I kind of go along the side of it's just an arm path exercise. So I really strongly really think that heavier overloaded baseballs can create a more efficient arm path. We're trying to teach guys to be in these power positions rather than getting long. That seems to be the biggest problem with our young guys, is just really whippy and eccentric arm actions. I'm not 100% certain of underload balls. I do think they have potential to just train fast and quick intentions. Now, as far as like the science behind that, I got nothing.
Yeah, that's something we're actually going to test here this winter. So if you guys are interested, we can put that out. But that's something we're probably going to test with some of our guys, is how, whether that actually translates. Because that's one thing we want to do, right? Both sides of this, we want to have our players get better, right? Whether we use one strategy or another, as long as we're making our athletes better.
Absolutely.
Right? That's what we want to do. So the best way for us to do that is to actually test it, right? See if it works. If we come out and we test weighted balls for the winter, and we find kids are getting hurt and they're not throwing any harder, we'll probably shift to something else, right? I mean, that just would make sense. So it's something we're going to constantly test and retest. The biggest thing that I've seen the few months here in the fall and start of the winter here that we've seen with weighted baseballs is it gives kids a sense of feel of where the arm is in relation to their throwing delivery. I know you guys do a lot of the med ball throws, and I love the med ball throws. They even had, like, my 11U team, you can ask Sam, they'd come in Monday after tournaments, and that's a lot of what they would do. Because I know, like you guys said, it puts a lot of less torques on the arm. So that's kind of a way for me to train. We can train motor pathways. We can get a little bit stronger without putting the same stress on the arm. But one sort of criticism, I guess, I got from it was the kids didn't really, while they might have been going through the arm pathway, they didn't quote-unquote feel it, if that makes sense. Whereas if we put a 9-ounce baseball or a 7-ounce baseball in a guy's hand, all of a sudden, because they're so trained to that 5-ounce baseball, that 7 or 9 puts heightened awareness, I guess, of where their arm is in space, and sort of helps feel out those arm path issues that Sam and I predominantly use the baseballs for. We've got an 11U kid who's a prime example. when he throws a 5-ounce baseball, it hurts my arm watching him throw. I mean, it's not clean, it's awkward. But yesterday we put I think we put a 9-ounce baseball in his hand yesterday and did some throwing drills, and it was like that, just immediately so much cleaner, so much more fluid, and he could feel the difference, which was something that I could get with your medicine ball throws. We could train the arm action, but he didn't feel it, if that makes sense. So we couldn't really get that click or that transfer immediately, if that makes sense. Is that something you guys have had problems with? Or
yeah, it makes sense. I think I've gone to the football because the footballs to me helps them with the understanding of the forearm rotation and how that important that is to the arm path. So yeah, I mean, I have those same problems y'all are talking about. I've just used I can use those med balls without shoulder rotation and just teaching them external internal, and then I can use the footballs to do it almost better, because if you don't pronate with the football, you can't throw a spiral. But I mean, understand. I mean, that's where I'm fine with. I mean, in the sense of not high intent throwing like that. If y'all are just doing it instructionally low intent, that's fine. I mean, those weighted instruments are fine. I mean, I use a weighted ball in my level 3, but only because I'm slowing down the legs with ankle weights. I didn't want to speed up the arm, so I kept the arm slow with the ankle weights. So I do believe it can be used as a biomechanics tool to teach, as long as it's not used as high intent. So I mean, are you guys for using it, in crow hops or running throws or for intent? Are you guys for that at all?
I'm really glad you asked that. Right now, we're just starting our throwing progression with our guys. This is both our first winter still, and so a lot of this is new. But eventually we want to build up to the running guns, and so it's really good to have this dialogue before we start doing that, and I have to explain this rationale to parents and kids. So I'm currently doing that myself. I've seen slight gains, predominantly with heavier balls, but I don't know. Maybe it's a confidence thing. If I can pull down a 7-ounce ball 90 miles an hour, there's no reason my 5-ounce shouldn't ever be below 90. Again, I'm not sure where the science stands with that, but if I feel confident throwing, that's a good thing. So for me, I'm doing it. I'm pretty much test dummy. With the younger kids, I am a little bit fearful of telling them to run and gun a 4-ounce, a 3-ounce baseball.
Yeah, that's that. But we probably won't do pull downs with any kids below probably 14. Yeah. So probably the more kids that can actually get in the weight room and do some lifting and build some strength, just some general strength. Those are the kids we'll probably, that's kind of the cutoff for us. So we're probably not going to be doing pull downs with 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds. And I think that's where a lot of these injuries, quote unquote, from weighted baseballs come from. I think it's that misapplication of how exactly to implement them, if that makes sense. Because if we look at what Kyle Bodie's done or what any other weighted ball guy's done, there's a full program, right? There's the build-up, there's the on-ramp, there's building strength, building the right pathways, and then they go to pull-downs. But I think what happens is we see these videos of, Casey Weathers or Trevor Bauer pulling down 107, and everybody thinks, oh, well, let me grab a 3-ounce baseball and try that. And what happens is we're not prepared for it, because you haven't been in the weight room for 6 months building a lot of power, a lot of strength, and you haven't worked on arm path, and you haven't built the proper motor pathways, and all of a sudden you're just sort of dumping all this right on the arm, and your arm's definitely not ready for it.
Yeah, in the rumor I heard, Casey Weathers hurt himself on a bench press, and then that's why he sat out for most of the season that year, and that's my problem. You might not hurt it in the throw, but based on the science that we can go over, I see it basically creating laxity in the shoulder because of the throws, to where you can then hurt it in the bench press. I had a guy who was at the end of my programs, and the only time we implement a snatch is at the very end. He's been in my programs for 7 months, and he was only snatching 130 pounds, and he tore his labrum. And I asked him what other throwing he was doing. He said he started running guns, and he started weighted ball, running guns. Mm-hmm. And so that's my problem here. It's that's why I don't want it in my programs, because based on the science, we look at what Mike Reinhold was talking about, that it doesn't correlate, or he's not finding correlations in their long-term study with weighted balls to arm strengthening or even arm speed, what they're finding is the arm's gaining external rotation. So he feels like there's some type of joint laxity occurring, which is allowing them to gain external rotation, which is allowing them to throw harder. But the problem is if you are building that joint laxity and then you're doing some heavy lift, specifically over the head, like a snatch or a bench press, then you wind up like one of my guys, Brendan Keene or Casey Weathers, and you injure yourself.
Or just taking that joint laxity into season as well.
Yeah. But I would also ask, they say it increases external rotation, but and that's the real problem with, any sort of study and with baseball and pitching mechanics in general, being that it's so multifactorial, to label it down to one little thing, I think is really hard. Does that make sense? It's hard to say that just the weighted baseballs adds external rotation, that could be the issue, because who's to say he's not getting an increased motor pathway? He's not getting, he could have been a guy that instead of getting that full lay back to 90, he was only getting to 60 because he's got early trunk rotation. All right, and who's to say, we fix that with weighted baseballs, he gets a different feel, and all of a sudden he's adding external, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it might not just be the weighted baseball.
Right, but the problem is
that's why it's so hard to say, no, this is bad, like right off the get-go.
I think I throw out weighted baseball just because people know what we're talking about. But yes, there's a lot of intricacies to it. But at the same time, too, when you take all that out of it, the error out of it, what is it really doing for you? Because if you have bad biomechanics and you're doing a running gun with a weighted ball and you have early trunk rotation, it's just going to make matters worse.
I think that goes back, too, with the arm path that you guys are talking about, trying to use the overweight balls to get a better feeling of the arm path. But I think that's where a lot of people can go wrong as well, when so much of, I believe, the arm path is dictated on the kinetic chain of energy coming up through the ground. Being able to transfer energy smoothly is very much going to influence that arm path as well. So I think guys just going to a weighted ball and trying to use that to fix the problem at the arm while ignoring the full body can be an issue as well.
Absolutely, and that's something that we work on as well. A lot of our throwing drills are based off how can we, sync it all up, so to speak. How can we get more power out of our legs? How can we sync up our trunk? Trying to put it all together while at the same time training it at the end too, if that makes sense. So we're not just going to do plyo throws and plyo throws and plyo throws and then just go do pull downs. We're also in the weight room building leg strength where, we're working throwing drills where we try to sync up, try to get more power from the legs, try to have more efficient movements all throughout our body. But we think weighted baseball is a great way to train the end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but the challenge for me is, how is it training the end? Is it, what's the purpose? Is it arm speed? Is it arm strength? What is it training at the end? You made the point that it creates a feel, more of a connection to the ball. I can understand that, but can't we just train that in a light throw? Does it have to be trained in a running gun? So, what's the So what do you feel is it training at the end for you, like you're saying?
A variety of mechanics. It just seems to be an effective means for us to monitor multiple kids at the same time. Long toss is good, playing catch, obviously I'm a huge proponent of that. But when you have, 20, 30 kids and we're in an indoor facility, it seems much easier to just take 2 or 3 at a time and we're just making throws into the wall. Not working command or anything like that. We're just working specific mechanics with these kids. I just feel like it is a training tool. It's not everything. You can't just do plyo wall or plyo care and expect to be throwing 95. But bit by bit, we take these teenagers and improve their mechanics. I tell them 1 or 2 things every week. A couple years down the road, we're right there.
But what's going to make you make that transition to running guns with them? That's my thing. I'm just trying to figure out, why do we go to running guns? Why do we go to extreme measures with the ball?
Well, the only thing that I've read up on this is, and this is from Kyle Boggs' perspective, is he doesn't want pitching off the mound to be the most stressful act of a pitcher. He wants so if we can find a way to push our arm past that limit. So if we're so accustomed to, for example, let's just put it in layman's 100 work, and pitching off a mound is 80. If we can get closer to being used to 100, then that 80 seems so much less, if that makes sense.
Well, it makes sense in the body, but not
80 pitches in a game isn't as much wear and tear because they're in so much better shape from other throwing.
But isn't that training the kinetic chain better, or is that just trying to make the arm the ability to handle more torque? I mean, to me, that sounds like you should just be training the kinetic chain better in, lifting and movement patterns, not the arm. I mean, are you applying that just to the arm?
Well, I would argue that we're also we're also in the weight room, and I think that's sometimes it gets overlooked in this sort of debate when you see the Twitter battles go back and forth. Is I think one thing all coaches at this point at least should be able to agree on is you need to be in the weight room. You need to be in the weight room, getting bigger, getting stronger. To me, it seems, from my perspective and my sort of limited experience with it is, there's certain mechanical things that if you can't do in a run and gun, then you can't do them on the mound, if that makes sense. So if we can't even do it there, how can we expect to then translate it to the mound?
Well, what are those things?
Go ahead, you're fine.
What are those mechanical things that you're learning from a running gun?
Hip separation.
Hip to shoulder separation. We have a lot of kids, and it might just be our area, where they get stuck on the back hip and we don't get any sort of linear drive. So if you can't do it from a crow hop and get our hips moving laterally, then how can we do it, from a standstill? And sort of training that and then slowly be able to implement it from the mound.
We're not having pitchers only doing this. It's all pitchers. So whether you're infielder, catcher, outfielder, I really think it helps catcher's arm path. But the running guns, that just reminds me of an outfield throw. I mean, I see no difference in throwing a guy out from right field and doing a running gun,
Well, the problem is we have guys that can throw 95 in the outfield and they can't throw 85 on the mound. There obviously is a challenge to transfer this. So what do you do with those guys where it's not being transferred? I mean, what's your approach at that point?
I mean, we're also that's a good question. We're also doing video analysis, and we're going to compare. Before we try to separate it a bit, but we want to see similar movement patterns, if that makes sense. I mean, we want to see good movement patterns from the mound, and if we can't do them in a run and gun, for example, like we said, the lateral hip drive, then we'll stop doing running guns, and we'll say.
Well, but here's the problem: is what I find in running guns is that the back leg, the drive leg, is acting completely different than on the mound. In a running gun, the back leg is more kind of slowing down the body at the point of the throw, and then allowing it to transfer energy to front foot, as opposed to on the mound, it's having to then load and generate all that momentum, all that energy into front foot strike. So it has a very different biomechanical requirement as opposed to in a running gun. So that's why it's not translating, because you're not training one of the most key components is how do we get the energy on the mound that we got when we were running, because we can't run on the mound. I mean, so the thing is, to me, the running gun is to feel energy through your body, but how extreme do we go? Is just 2 steps enough? I mean, why do we have to fully run?
And then how does that help you from a static position? How does it really transfer from doing a running throw to being able to take it to the mound and then understand how to drive through your back leg to create that momentum down the mound? Because when you take guys in our program, for example, when we put them in the drills and really try to teach them how to use the back leg, they have so many mobility issues, power issues, all of these issues that are really keeping them from being able to efficiently drive from the ground, get their hips to come up and separate against that energy. And I just don't see how running throws address those at all or looking at those issues.
Right. Yeah, I would definitely agree that the run portion of the run and gun is eyewash. You really just need a solid crow hop. So, I mean, some of our guys use the whole batting cage, but really you need about 10 feet for like a solid crow hop and run and gun. I guess I'd like to ask you the same question. If we can't find a transfer from running guns to the mound, how do you guys approach that? Is it more of an on-mound game feel, or do you actually think that two-handed med ball throws is a way that effective means of sinking the lower half?
What the two-handed med ball throws do is it doesn't allow you to use the arm. So when you can't use the arm as much to generate your velocity, then you have to go somewhere else. So you wind up trying to get the hips, the legs to go. You work on separation. You work on the trunk.
Front leg stabilization, extension.
Yeah. So those are all the things that the studies show that typically low-velocity pitchers do poorly. Studies show low-velocity pitchers have very similar arm movements as high-velocity pitchers. It's just they fail and the trunk and torso movement. So that's what we're trying to emphasize. So we're strictly drill based. I mean, yeah, we'll add in a couple step throws if somebody's in analysis paralysis and they just need to feel what it's like to move energy through their body and get out of their head. But most of the time we're in static drills teaching the sequence of movements through the kinetic chain and how critical the legs are in driving the hips in driving the trunk. And then that point, if you've done that correctly, most arms will work. Where you have someone with issues with an arm path, you might have to put in, like we said, like some football throws or some med ball external rotation throws. And then also we go into the baseball. I mean, we do convert all this to the baseballs, but we find if you don't stay in static throws that are putting a high demand on the legs and the trunk to work better than they would work on the mound, then you're going to not transfer guys. So most of our guys, when they do a running throw or really a two-step throw, they sometimes won't even throw as hard as they throw on the mound because they have such good lower halves and the mound's giving that little angle, that little decline that they can pick up speeds with.
And also at the same time too, that like those drills are going to teach the biomechanics and the motor control, but then also just looking at the athlete and realizing, doing an assessment and being like, okay, you have poor hip internal rotation, you have tight hip extension, like you can't drive that up. Or we do, an athletic assessment, and man, you just can't create a lot of power, low vertical jump, low broad jump, you don't run very fast. We got to put more energy through that system. Or, maybe even body weight, man, like you got to put on more muscle mass so we can have the ability to create more force. And then you start putting those pieces together, and that's how you kind of build the athlete to be able to create those forces from a static position.
Absolutely. I think that's a great process. And I think that's something every coach or facility wishes they could do. But sometimes you get in situations like we are where we have 3 full-time coaches and there's, 150 kids in the organization. We don't have the time. We don't have that capability. Does that make sense to be able to test every single kid if they can?
I think that's hard. But I would want to rather spend more time in basic corrective movements as opposed to just throwing movements. Because that's probably what a lot of those kids need. They need the corrective movements to help make the kinetic chain more efficient.
Yeah.
Because once you really make those improvements there, then all of a sudden you're going to see better throws coming from them, as opposed to giving them all that wear and tear early on in their careers when they didn't have good kinetic change.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we're in a situation now where we're, I don't want to say micromanaged, but there's no second option. Like we're forced to do these fly balls and drive line. And
I believe it, man.
We got 14, 15-year-olds that can't squat their body weight, and it's like, what is an overload throw going to do?
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you, man. I'm with you, and so really the market wants these easier approaches, but they really need the hard approaches. They need the work in the legs and the hips and the trunk and all the corrective stuff to get their bodies more efficient. And it's unfortunate because I think we need to find a way to give it to them. And I understand your challenges, guys. I totally get it. I'm not putting any of this on you. You're doing the best you can, but baseball needs to evolve, man. We've got to evolve specifically for the health of these kids. Because I was the 18-year-old kid that tore his rotator cuff, and the doctor said I'd never play again. No one should have to go through that if they love this sport, where a doctor's telling them, hey, you ruined your arm, you'll never play again at 18. So that's my passion, and that's why this needs to change, guys. We've got to get more good information out there,
And also, too, on that recent article that came out is weighted balls, the wave of the future, and they use examples like Aroldis Chapman, Zach Britton, Felix Hernandez, like all these guys. Aroldis Chapman is 6'5", 215 pounds, and is rumored to have beat Billy Hamilton in a 60-yard dash. These kids aren't Aroldis Chapman. They don't have the motor coordination. They don't have the athleticism. They don't have the body weight. They don't have the height. So to me, weighted balls aren't the answer to address those things. It's building yourself up to the best athlete you can be to address those things.
Absolutely, and that's the sort of approach we use as well. We want guys to get stronger. We want to teach them how to deadlift, how to squat, how to bench, how to power clean. And then in an ideal world, that's when we would start to implement these programs. But I think every coach should at this point be able to agree that you have to be in the weight room and you have to be strong. You can look at any big leaguer, even Billy Hamilton, for his size, is a strong dude. You won't find weak athletes in any professional sport. So I think that's something that, luckily, the tide has started to turn on that.
Yeah.
But that's something I think that no matter who you are, should at least always be some sort of common ground. Yeah,
there's the only thing that's troubling me is those that are mixing. We we use more high-stress lifting, low-stress throwing. I don't like how guys are using our high-stress lifting or a high-stress lifting approach and then mixing in high-stress throwing, because that's where a lot of these injuries are coming from.
And we're seeing a lot of these injuries.
Yeah, and I'm getting. I've had 5 of my testimonials have Tommy John or labrum tear because they implemented a running weighted ball approach on top of my approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the problem, guys. It's like we've got to be careful building in this more intense lifting and then still putting all the stress on their arms and their throws, because like Casey Weathers, like Brandon Keene, you get hurt in a lift when you should have never got hurt in that lift. Your arm, you didn't have a chance. Didn't have a chance to survive.
Absolutely. That's something I've seen with a few of my personal clients is I've had, what should I do about Brent's program? Or what should, how can I implement it with this? And I'm like, just pick one. It doesn't, at this point, we've seen enough success from both of your guys' programs that they work. But the issue, like you said, is when you start to mix and match and you start to, I want to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, specifically if you don't know what
you
you're
need
doing.
To pick a program and then stick it out to the end instead of trying to look for that instant, where can I get 5 miles an hour by tomorrow? Understand it's a grind and it's going to take, 6 months to a year at least to really start to see full progress in the correct way. I think that to me is where the big shift needs to occur, is to shift expectations from, the coach is the magician and I can get you 5 miles an hour tomorrow to you've got to work hard, you've got to do all these things in the full program, as opposed to trying to find that one little trick, if that makes sense.
Yep, very good.
I mean, also too with picking between one though, but when they go into a weighted ball approach in their off season, you look at ASMI looking at overuse, poor physical fitness, and poor mechanics as being 3 of the biggest things for injury. So when you're taking a weighted ball approach in your off season, you're just continuing throwing, so that's overuse. Running guns and all that. I don't see how it's really addressing the whole kinetic chain and working on your mechanics. And then if you're sacrificing throwing for the ability to go into an extreme, not extreme, but an intense strength and conditioning program, I don't really see how that's really helping with your physical fitness either. So that's where I struggle with it as well.
Yeah, so it's like, guys, I'm fine with warm-ups, like weighted balls with warm-ups. I'm fine with using it to teach arm path, but I'm not seeing it, guys, unless y'all can tell me I'm wrong. I mean, I'm not seeing us taking this into extreme throwing, into running guns with these instruments, or even crow hops with these instruments, just because, that's the one thing out of the ASMI study. It did say that they were fine on a mound, but once you added a 2-step crow hop, the torques went above what was on the mound. And then if that's the reason for doing it, then we have a study that says professional pitchers, based on their body weight, puts less torques on their arm than youth pitchers. So it's like the studies actually show that the kinetic chain gets better, torques go down as players advance. Why are we using this mentality of let's add more torque so it can handle more torques when that doesn't look like it's the case? That's, to me, the big piece that makes me go, I don't think there's any need to do these in extreme throw.
And you can watch Brent's biomechanic analysis of guys, Brian Ellington, a guy's throwing 98 miles per hour, and pairing him up with a guy who's throwing 81 miles per hour. And we see that the guy who's throwing 81's arm was moving faster in 240 frames per second than Brian Ellington at a 17 mile per hour difference in velocity. And then we're seeing that his trunk velocity in lower half is moving faster than the lower velocity guy.
Absolutely. And that's something that we try to train here as well. And I don't want to say, what exactly they do up in Washington, but that's something we train here as well, is a lot of our throwing drills are how can we get the lower half more involved? How can we get more separation? How can we feel separation? How can we keep the trunk back longer? For us, we do want to train arm pathway and we want to have strong arms, but we agree with you guys on that end too, that we have to be able to get the lower half going. We've got to be strong. We've got to develop from the ground up, not just from the top end too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it needs.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead, Sam. Go ahead.
Okay, it was really interesting. You said you're fine with the plyos as warm up. That goes along exactly what Justin Asperger's doing at App State with the guys, or at least what he was doing last fall. So, kind of funny. But what do you got on wrist weights? You mentioned weighted balls are okay for warm up. I've found that 5-10 pound wrist weights have been an effective means of teaching supination to pronation, and kind of goes along the lines of that arm path correctiveness we were talking earlier. Do you think there's any fact in that's strengthening our shoulder, like holds, or rather than just teaching arm path, it's actually we're training our decelerating muscles. I guess throwing weighted baseball holds is kind of out of the picture now. It doesn't seem like a whole lot of guys are doing that. But what do you guys got on wrist weights?
Well, I mean, I saw Marshall do them in the 70s. So, I mean, Marshall put them together for the purpose of training the forearm rotation. As far as it for developing decelerator strength, I mean, it's fine. I mean, I do, 3 5-pound job work. It's very similar. We turn it over into external rotation. But there's more to that in developing deceleration strength. We've got to build the lat strength, which pulls are the best for lat strength, and got to build, the trap strength, shrugs, cleans, all that is great for developing traps, which can make your scap stronger.
Scapular strength, shoulder strength.
So the point is, there's more to it than just decelerator strengthening than just with those wrist weights. I can understand the feel of feeling how to early pronate. I use this little instrument I made with a stick or the end of a bat and a ball at the end, and you go through the motion, and what it does, it makes you pronate quicker. All that's fine. I mean, that's good. You do need to get kids to understand how important pronation is because it reduces the stress on the UCL. But I'm not going to argue with something like that. But unless if someone was saying that that's all I do for deceleration strengthening, and I'm not doing pull-ups and stuff like that, I'd say no, that's not going to be that effective. At the end of the day, I wouldn't feel completely safe that that's going to protect my shoulder.
Yeah.
It's kind of along the lines with those reverse throws, too.
That's exactly what I was
thinking. The reverse throws are kind of the same thing. It's like, that's not going to be enough to develop deceleration strength because the ball is not heavy enough, to get into the big muscle groups. Yeah, we do want to train the rotator cuff and stay light there, but we got to get into the big muscle groups, which do a lot of the deceleration. And throwing a ball behind you in a reverse movement isn't the same as unloading, 70 to 100 degrees per second in a throw going forward. It's just there's no way it could equal that same amount of force.
And I think this is where baseball gets really scared, though, too, because they don't want to go into an approach of where you're strengthening overhead, where you have guys pressing overhead, where you have pulling. You have guys building themselves bigger, faster, stronger, because it's so against the grain. We've never been in baseball where guys are pushing crazy weight. You know what I mean? So, again, this all goes into an off-season approach, and that's where people kind of get thrown off with it.
Yeah, and that's baseball in general. Is anything against the grain automatically becomes sort of this crazy thing? I mean, it's a shock to me that the DH was ever passed way back when, just knowing how classic baseball is and how nothing about it can be changed for whatever reason. But it goes the same way with training. Our biggest thing is we like to use the core 4 exercises, we call them, with the plyo work. Like you said, we do more decelerated turning with pull-ups and scat push-ups and different exercises. But to us, it's all about that feel. If we can help guys become more aware of their mechanics and how they're moving through space, that helps us coach them better. I mean, my ideal goal as a pitching coach is to be able to get a pitcher to the point where I can just sit in a chair and watch his bullpen, and he knows himself, oh, my arm's flying out, or oh, I'm not getting enough down the mound, or he knows it on his own because we've spent enough time training himself to be aware of how things are and how things should be, and to know when things are off, that he doesn't need a coach standing over his shoulder saying, nope, you got to do this, you're off it, by 2 angles here, you're off. Just to be able to be more self-aware and be able to take charge of your own career. At the end of the day, it's your arm, it's your throwing motion, it's your swing. Take charge of it. And that's always been my belief and my philosophy, that you only get one shot at this, you only get one life to live. Do everything you can on your own to figure out, what's best for me.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is, though, and however we do this, we have to have a good core principle of how this all works. And I think that's where a lot of my arguments are. It's like, I feel like there's 2 schools. There's the arm speed school or the arm strength school.
Or arm path school.
Arm path school, and then there's the kinetic chain. And if you look at the kinetic chain, the best study is Kibler and Chandler, who found a 20% decrease in the kinetic energy delivered from the hip and trunk to the arm requires a 34% increase in the rotational velocity of the shoulder to put the same force on the hand. So we look at the force generators as the legs, the core, the trunk, and the funnel. What funnels that energy is the arm. So whatever you do in your training, you have to stick to a core principle. Is it going to be an upper body principle, or is it going to be a full chain principle, the kinetic chain? And all your training has to adapt to that. And that's why I said, if I hold on to this core principle, it's hard for me to fit a running gun weighted throw into it, because when I look at the ASMI study, the only speeds that are changing in the body were the arm speeds. They go up when they do a crow hop with the light ball, and then they go down when they get to the heavy balls. The trunk speeds, the hip speeds, they all stay the same. The arm speeds are just changing. So to me, you're just influencing the funnel. And I'm all about, once we get the energy to that point and we give it the time to get there, the funnel, it takes care of itself. I mean, that's why people think I'm not an arm approach. I am arm approach. I just have this core principle and understanding of the kinetic chain, to where if I do everything right up to the arm finishes it on its own. It's like the end of the whip. We don't go to the end of the whip and start moving it around. We just move the handle of the whip.
Yeah, giving the arm more time to load can put it in a better position, where it's instead of forcing it to overcompensate if you're not getting enough energy moving up the chain, which I think the overcompensation is what leads to a lot of bad arm paths or injury just in general.
Yeah, we just had Chris Medlin come in here, and he comes in here 2 Tommy Johns. He's got rotator cuff problems right now. He's in gird. We measured him out. He has full gird in his arm. He can't load into his hip. We put all of his weight on his back hip, and he can't hold it.
Terrible hip extension, all locked up in the hip.
So he's been pitching for years with a broken kinetic chain, and he's literally at the point of breaking. He's so broken down. So
I'm nuts.
So it's like you take someone to him and you give him a weighted ball, you'll end his career immediately.
Right. Yeah. Right.
This guy, you got to build his hips. You got to restore the integrity in his hips, the mobility in his hips. And you got to show him how the trunk separation has to improve to give his arm more time to go through the path.
How the back leg drive enhances that.
Right, because his arm is being hyperangulated, it's being drugged through, and that's what's causing all the arm injury. So it's like, I mean, of course, when you look at a young kid, you don't see him at the point of Chris Medlin, but think of it that way. Think of, if I don't get this kid on the right track, if I don't get him in the right principle, yeah, I mean, lucky he could be a Chris Medlin, have a great career, but he could also at the same time too have 2 TJs and rotator cuff problems at the end of his year because you didn't get him on the right path.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it sounds like we're just going to get our guys working from the ground up, and med ball throws before plyo balls, definitely. I really like.
And I've always liked your med ball throws, and like I said before, that's something we used, and we probably should use more as a training program. But yeah, we definitely agree with everything starts from the ground up, and that's something we've really tried to implement from the last. We've had winter workouts our second week now, and a lot of our throwing drills are working on getting a feel for separation and getting a feel for how our back hip drives and getting a feel for being loaded in our hip and then being able to drive out of it. And that's a lot of what we build. And it's a lot of the foundation, especially with the younger guys. Because like you said, I completely agree with get them on the right track now, and they won't have issues when they're 16, 17, 18 years old. And you don't have to, quote unquote, start from scratch, right? They already have that good foundation to build from. And it's a lot easier to make changes now when they're 11 and 12 as opposed to when they're 17, 18, and they've been doing this for 10 years. And those are hard habits to break.
Yeah, I'm with you. And hey, just remember that, like with the med throws, what we try to do with them is use them as an application to teach the kinetic chain. So it's just that's the challenge. Is I know it's easy to give kids just weighted balls because you don't have to really coach them. You just kind of tell them do some throws, do some drills. That's the hard thing with my approach. That's why my approach does not grow well at all, because you can't just throw those balls. You got to teach them how the legs are driving the hips and how you're separating. And it's laborious. I get it. I understand the challenges behind it. When coaches say, they're not for me, I understand it, man. I understand. But at the same time, too, what are we trying to do? At the end of the day, we're trying to help these kids have great careers, So sometimes you got to take the time and you got to grind. And that's the hard thing here. And I think that's the problem, and that's where baseball is. They're at a crossroad. We try this easy road, seems to be working. Problem is we don't know the end results, what's it's really doing, or do we stick to what the science is teaching us, and that we really need to learn this stuff and work hard and and understand it if we're going to be healthy and successful. So, guys, I appreciate it, man. Anything last thing I want to say that you guys can leave us with?
No, other than really appreciate your time, and we definitely are going to implement ground up teaching, and I think we can maybe get a little bit more time in the weight room versus throwing balls into the wall aimlessly.
Yeah.
So
Hey, that would,
Yeah, appreciate
be
your time,
awesome.
Brent.
That'd be awesome.
Every,
Well, guys,
every time you guys shows, I always learn something. Definitely got the same over here is taking plenty of notes for us. Appreciate it. Hope we anybody out there, I hope we gave some nice tidbits of information out. Other than that, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And yeah, guys, love it. And we'll stay connected and we'll exchange ideas. And I really appreciate you guys doing this. I think it helps a lot of kids. So we'll put this out there and see what it does.
it's definitely benefiting us.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys.
All right, guys, we'll talk soon.